Ground control to Major 2-on-1. It's 2-on-1, the internet and universe's favorite podcast about theology and pop culture, hosted by two disciples pastors. I'm one of those co-hosts, the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
Oh, and I'm your other co-host, or should we say co-pilots today? The Reverend Stephanie Kendall. Here she is. Arthur, how are you?
You know, I'm doing okay. I got my coffee mug, I got some coffee, and I'm ready to talk speculative fiction.
I love that about you. I love that journey for you. Very excited. Are you ready? I mean, the holiday, I had to tell my congregation last week, it seems like we're kind of winding down because the end of the year for lots of people is like it feels like, it's coming to a completion. But for those of us in ministry, I feel like All Saints is really like the kickoff Sunday that leads to a vision for Easter, which I don't think a lot of people talk about.
Right.
Like we have we're talking the Martian today. We're planning these long journeys, these long visions. And we're in week 2.
It's like the constant acceleration engine where we this is our busy 6 months from All Saints to Pentecost, really.
It's like, but can we just take off a little bit of that month of after Easter into Pentecost?
I take my 2 weeks after Easter. I love it. I'm essentially dead.
From the resurrection.
Right. It's my Holy Saturday, just last 2 weeks. Yeah. So as we talk about preparing for liturgical holidays, all of which seem to be coming up at this point, we would be remiss if we didn't mention our sponsor, Jeff Wunrow Designs, who are celebrating 16 or maybe possibly even 17 years of making ordinary time extraordinary through the creation and promotion, we're the promoters, the creation and selling of fine liturgical textiles.
I know. I have 2 now, and I love them. And I plan on getting more because Deuces, at the end of this year, our 2-on-1 promo code goes away. So get them while they're hot. Get them while you can.
That's right. If you haven't been to jeffwunrow.com, jeffwunrow.com, do that after our show, preferably, or open another tab if you're like watching this online. Be sure to check out the wide variety of stoles and customization options available, because until the end of the year, 2-on-1, all one word, all letters, will get you 15% off your entire stole order.
I mean, it's incredible. And as like I said, we're casting this long vision, right? So, and Jeff makes ordinary time extraordinary, but he also makes all the other times wonderful as well. And so as you think about
advantageous and Epiphany epic and Lent liturgically wonderful.
Exactly. And so for your clergy friends out there, clergy, if it's you, or just, maybe you need a deacon stole, or maybe you want face masks or whatever, Jeff said it all. And as you talk about what it means to kind of come back in person, as you cast these long visions of, all these different seasons of our lives, Jeff has incredible textiles that help you kind of navigate those seasons and help you, if you're a 3 like me and like to, what you wear and what you put on helps you understand more fully your role in spaces, or how you might communicate some of your beliefs or theology or what is happening in your life. Jeff helps do that really beautifully. I have lots of stoles and I'm looking at them right now. I've got I probably have 10, which isn't a lot, but it's a lot. And many of them hit my toes, like they're too long because I'm short, and Jeff's hits me just right because I got to actually tell him how tall I was and how long I wanted my stole. And it's like Goldilocks, it's just right.
So whether it's about stoles or chasubles or copes or things that you wear, or about paraments, banners, processionals, really anything that has got your altar covered, Jeff Wunrow Designs has got you covered as well. We once again encourage you to go to Jeff Wunrow, JEFFWUNROW.com, following our show today. And again, use that coupon. It's the best one out there, and it's just for you, Deuces.
Absolutely. So let's head on over to a new planet, or bring our visitor, our guest into this one.
It's going to be just so nerdy, and I can't wait.
I'm so excited.
And I once again did not give our guest a 30-second warning. Brad Lyons, ground control to Major Tom. I did not give you the warning I promised, but life is about adaptation. He can't hear us right now. That's interesting. I'm going to put a little pin right here.
Mm-hmm.
Brad, can you hear us? Can we hear you?
Now I can, yeah.
All right. So I'm actually going to just do this one thing real fast. We just dropped a pin for the sake of recording. I'm going to drop another. Brad Lyons, welcome to 2-on-1.
Hey.
It is great to be here. Thanks for letting me come to the party.
Hey,
so glad to have you on.
So Brad, who are you and what do you do?
The last time I checked, I am the president and publisher of Chalice Press, which is the denominational publishing house of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. I believe the two of you are well versed in what that means. But we publish a lot of resources that reach out beyond that particular denomination to the progressive and moderate portion of the church that welcomes everybody to God's table. So that's what we do in a nutshell.
Hey, Brad, would you possibly be interested in a collection of essays about pop culture and theology?
Gee, I already have one of those under contract. So
do you?
I do.
Weird.
What? Is this the first that our Deuces are hearing about this? It might be. Stay tuned, friends.
Already building in teasers. I love it.
Oh, we've got this covered, Brad.
I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do.
Very excited. But so, we have a very special new relationship with you, but we've also known you for a while and are very excited. We had your lovely wife on for our SVU episode.
Actually, our timing was we had Courtney on as many days before as we're having Brad on after their wedding. So technically, we're part of the wedding party, Spiff.
The wedding party just keeps on rocking. I'll tell you, it just hasn't stopped.
Listen, I heard it was a great time. So
it was. I'm sorry we could not invite the masses, but you don't
have to apologize. It is all good. Yeah. But very excited to have you on because we've been pitching like, hey, Brad, come on the show. It's a fun time, we promise. And then you came to us with The Martian, which is it was a little like, okay, let me think about this. And I was like, I've read it and then I hadn't seen it until last night. But talk to us a little bit about why this movie in particular is something that is meaningful to you and why we are talking about it today.
So you read The Martian before you saw The Martian. That's one of the few times that a book actually precedes the movie for a lot of people. So the Martian came out several years ago. Andy Weir wrote it and he self-published it and kind of gave it out in drips and drabs. And then it started to climb the charts and his future publisher picked up on it and signed him to a contract and the thing exploded unlike anything in the movie. Spoiler alert. Well, I guess one or two things explode in the movie, but anyhow.
Intentional explosion.
But I hadn't heard anything about it until I saw this trailer with Matt Damon and Jessica Chastain and a really great crew. And I was like, oh, I'm totally going to watch that movie. No question about it. And so that was, we started hearing about this in 2014. 2014 was a pretty crappy year for me. I was going through a divorce and that hit early in 2015. And so 2015 was a pretty rough year for me and I felt pretty isolated and alone. So come November, The Martian comes to theaters and there's a movie about a guy who's isolated and alone and makes it work, right? Mm-hmm. And gets back together with his people and survives. And it was, I believed then, and I believe now still, the greatest movie ever made. Just not to bury it with praise or anything, but yeah.
It's a faithful adaptation. There are so few movies that translate the books perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's just wonderful.
And I just actually finished reading the book last month or in September, not too long ago. I had it for a couple of years. I loaned it to my son, who is not real good at keeping track of things. And it finally made its way back home. And so I got to read through it later this summer. And so I've enjoyed both of those. I cannot tell you how many times I've listened to the soundtrack, both the 70s disco stuff that Commander Lewis jams on, but also the Harry Gregson Williams soundtrack that is just always, I never skip it when it pops up on my playlist. I never skip it. And I'll point to another quick podcast. If you like that soundtrack, go listen to Song Exploder. a great little soundtrack that dissects music. Episode 53, Harry Gregson Williams dissects how he built the main theme, and it's just fascinating. It's one of the few times when I sat in my driveway listening to an NPR story and then went inside and spent money. So it was an easy decision.
What a plug for NPR.
You're welcome. They scrappy little group over there.
I love it. Well, go ahead, Arthur.
Well, just for our listeners who may not be familiar in the event that you are, and by the way, Brad, this is a spoiler show. We offer no protection from the terrifying world of information on 2-on-1. The Martian is a sci-fi novel about the first manned landing on Mars, where they start to build habitat. There's a storm, they bug out, they think their botanist, Mark Watley, is dead, and they leave him. But he is alive, and he survives for hundreds and hundreds of days. And it's about NASA and also the Chinese Space Agency and really Earth working like crazy to get him back home.
Right.
There's the line, what is it? It's going to be our overriding and singular obsession until he's either back on Earth or confirmed dead on Mars.
Right. And so it's probably the best first 10 minutes of a movie I've ever seen, because it doesn't waste any time. And so for those of you who haven't seen it, Jason Bourne, let me look at that. Jason Bourne. We all know he's Jason Bourne, but he's actually Matt Damon.
He's Will Hunting is what he is.
I'm going to do a sequel to this one on the Jason Bourne series. We're going to exclude one or two of those episodes, but anyhow, but Matt Damon is about 80% of the movie, and it's a testament to science. It's a testament to creativity, to engineering, to the human spirit, and also to potatoes, because he survives for months and months on potatoes that he grows in soil that he creates from Martian dirt and what's the rating on this? And poo. Yeah, the poo of his castmates.
Wait, of his crewmates. It's not like he's like getting bags of Jessica Chastain's waste. It's
Thank you. I'm sorry. Well, actually the Ridley Scott direction was never clear on that. But yeah, it's Ridley Scott who does no wrong, right? At least in the sci-fi realm. And so it's a quickly paced movie. It never, as far as I've ever been concerned, slows down. It's cinematic. It's got these wide sweeping landscape shots that really do look like you imagine Mars looks. I mean, it's Jordan, but all signs point to yes. And it's just a gorgeously filmed movie. And I can't say enough about it. The two movies that I recognize that The Martian is inspired by: Dances with Wolves, right? You've got a person who's abandoned, left for dead. No one knows he's out there. He has to survive on his own. But he finds some people he doesn't know, some aliens, the Native Americans in that sense, to help him out. And I've always loved Dances with Wolves. And the other one, I mean, no one saw this one coming. It's Airplane, right? We know that on Airplane, we see Robert Hayes take over a doomed airliner and land that thing safely. Both of them are left to their own devices to land the plane safely. So that's really what The Martian is. It's a combination of Dances with Wolves and Airplane.
So that brings me to the first question I'd like to ask on this. So this is a story.
How the heck did I get to that point?
No, it's great. I mean, anytime anybody mentions Airplane, I always want to say I have a drinking problem and then dump water all over myself, but I won't.
You bet. It's a great movie.
So The Martian is a lot about ingenuity and creativity and the wonders of science and really the resilience of the human spirit. What does this say about the church? Or where does, and I mean, institutional church?
Yeah, not as much as it ought to, I'm afraid, at times. We are an organization that has been around for 2,000 years through various incarnations, but we still have a lot of old habits that go back a long, long time. Now, I grew up United Methodist, which means I was raised respecting old habits and traditions. And so on Christmas and Easter, I still need to hear some big music to really drive home the point that, oh yes, it's Christmas or Easter. I've kind of gotten over a lot of that other United Methodist stuff. I'll let them take care of that. But
to our two United Methodist listeners, we apologize if any of this has offended you.
I love the United Methodist Church, and I love the direction in which it is evolving. And I wish them the best of luck. And I hope that my parents and my sister, who still go to a United Methodist Church, will forgive me. So anyhow, it's interesting to watch that denomination come along. But just looking at Protestant Christianity in general, we root ourselves in traditions that are hundreds of years old, whether that is how we go about worshiping, how we go about thinking, how we go about treating others as well. And that's where I think our church is in a lot of trouble, in that we have such differing views on how to get together, how to respect each other, that we can't agree on how to respect each other anymore. And we're seeing that's a real problem, particularly here in American Christianity these days, where the tension level just keeps ratcheting up and ratcheting up and ratcheting up. So, I would like to think that the progressive thinking that is open and inclusive and affirming of all of God's creation, whether that's humanity or other life forms or the resources with which we have been bestowed, we need to be thinking about that differently, because we have not done a very good job over the last couple hundred years as we've industrialized of taking care of that creation. We have not done a good job over the last 600-700 years of imperialization, respecting each other as we do that. And those are all rooted in old, outdated, racist, pick all your ists that you want, thinking that needs to be thrown out sooner than later.
So maybe, I think it's fascinating because all the little details are what I love about this book. About this movie. And Spiff, don't let me overtalk, and forgive me.
No, you're fine.
They talk about how the U.S. Postal Service immediately issued Mark Watley commemorative stamps. Then there was a run on them by stamp collectors because they've never issued one for someone who was alive, because they thought he was dead, and it's the right way to pay tribute. How do we convince the church that it's okay to die in order to rise again? That is, like, how do we get a run on the church's stamps?
All right, so this is an hour-long podcast
with many questions.
Boy, I mean, no one has figured it out yet. That's the biggest challenge I think that the church has right now, is trying to figure out how do we revitalize. And so Phyllis Tickle was I know her through my publishing connections as the person who theorized that every 500 years, the church goes through a massive rebirth, a massive garage sale. And so it doesn't take too much math to realize we're due as we hit the fourth 500 years. And, in case you haven't noticed, things have been a little rough over the last couple of years, right? And church has been a little bit disrupted over the last couple of years. And as we look back at what I hope is a waning epidemic, we will see how many things changed. I mean, I'm talking from a house as opposed to an office. That's just one small step. I go to church in multiple states now. So that has changed. The need for me to get up at 8 o'clock on a Saturday and drive somewhere wearing a certain, button-up shirt and a pair of slacks, that's gone. And I think a lot of us have gotten used, those of us who are not at the front of the church, and thank you for those of you who are at the front of the church, those of us who are sitting in the pews really like our slippers. And so we got to figure out how we're going to accommodate that in the future. Because I heard a figure last week that indicated that of the people who are planning to go back to church once the pandemic is over, 2 out of 3 of them are already back. Okay, so there's still one additional person out of 3 who's not ready to go back yet. But if you're looking around at your pews, your ratios may not be keeping up with that. And that's a recognition of what you've lost.
Well, I don't know. Is it loss? I feel so. We're fully online still. We're not in person. I'm a pastor who also likes her slippers. So there's
I will say I was treating that like a zero-sum game, and it's not. And we need to admit that.
And I think this opportunity that we've been given here, much like what's happening on like the creativity that is necessary for Mark Watney to like kind of figure out if he's going to live or die. Because there's the question at the very end of that movie, you know, the first thing very end of the movie, spoiler alert, he lives and he goes and he's a professor, or he's training new astronauts. And the first thing he says is like, you know, I'm gonna get it out of the way. Like, yes, you think you're gonna die, and you know, reconcile that. And so I think some of it is like, well, first of all, not all of our people were ever able to come to church. We've been homebound people this entire time. And it's a new church. It's okay to say, and that old church for all of us has died. And yet here we are as people of the resurrection, as people of ingenuity, and as people of creativity. This is a real opportunity to say, how might we grow these new potatoes, right? Like how much, what is in our space is already there? What's established connections, relationships, things like that, that can help us move into this new age.
So to take that metaphor, just let's combine the two here. The church is the people that let me start that one over again. The way that we think about membership has to change. The way we think about participation has to change. The way we think about buildings has to change. The way we think about ministries being somewhat focused and siloed has to change. So if you want to talk about how we're going to grow new potatoes, we got to think about what we're going to lose congregations. There's just no question about that. But you know what? We've been losing congregations for a long time. Congregations have life cycles and many of them are flaming out, but we've got to figure out, how do vital congregations figure out how to find resources from a variety of sources, or how can those dying congregations work together to make sure that they grow some spiritual potatoes when we're all said and done? How can we take our dying and turn it into life elsewhere?
That's such a good question. I think if we're not asking that question, then you're not actually focused on living, you're actually focused on dying.
Can I just throw out my favorite quote from the entire book?
Go for it.
Cogent to this. It's, my terrifying struggle to stay alive became somehow routine. And I'm tempted to paint that on the wall of the church. Of the church I serve, of every church. When I break into churches, I'm going to paint that on the wall. I'm also going to paint a bunch of floating dead bodies in the Noah's Ark murals. We've talked about this before because we're just lying to kids.
I mean, I'm going to paint over every white Jesus that there is. So there's that.
Okay, so Spiff, you and I got our graffito posse.
No, but as we're talking about potatoes and what does it mean to live, one of the things that I really appreciated, and that I watched the movie last night, I think for the first time, although which is odd because I remember hearing about this movie back when I still worked in film. And and I know who cut the trailer and things like that. And so, but as someone who is now in faith, right, who left that life and who came into this one, the potatoes were really striking to me because as disciples particularly, every week, the only thing we need for worship is communion. There's just one thing, and it is the same thing in theory every single week that keeps us alive. And so the potatoes that keep him alive as he rations, as he kind of navigates and regrows and, you know, all of that was such a beautiful communion metaphor for me to say, like, we have the literal shit we need to grow these new potatoes, to say, I said potatoes weird, but to grow these new potatoes in a way that reminds us that there is everlasting life if we are willing to do the dirty work, if we are willing to come to the space to be fed and not get bogged down with what are we being fed with, but like, here is the gift of life. That I thought was a really nice way in which to remind ourselves that, like, you just kind of need that one thing in a space to keep you going.
And one of Watney's first discoveries, realizations, is that he needs to create water. He's got enough food, the rations from the rest of the crew that left him behind, to last a couple hundred souls, if I remember correctly. But without water, he'll die of dehydration. And so the first 20, 30 minutes of the movie and of the book are him trying to create water by basically burning off rocket fuel. And so if you loved chemistry class in high school or college, have I got the book for you? And if you're a chemistry teacher, have I got the nightmare book for you? I hope that my high school chemistry teacher, Mrs. T, isn't listening. But
I hope she is. Hey, Mrs. T.
Yeah, she's great. So if you think about taking rocket fuel, this incredibly complex chemical that can kill you if you don't use it right, and trying to convert it to water, one of the simplest chemical combinations out there. That's faith, that's life right there. Trying to take everything we have to deal with on a daily basis and combine it with those potatoes. There, you got, the potato of life broken for you, the water of life condensed for you. You got your communion elements right there.
I love that. Well, and as you were talking, I just thought of something else, if I might. Because I think it's an important kind of caveat to all of this as well. Mark Watney is a botanist. He's not a chemist. And you have said, right. Oh, here, all these people that are interested in chemists. Are we as the church too focused on saying this is a chemistry church? And are we overlooking the botanists that might be able to grow new life?
And can't there be botanists who have a chemistry background or chemists who have a botany background? And what about,
But are we overlooking, do we get too bogged down in the people that can do the certain things? Chemists can do chemistry, but here is a botanist that also does chemistry, that also does that. I don't know. And in your opinion, you go to, like you said, you go to a lot of churches, you go to, you have you've got a vision for kind of the landscape of faith development that's happening. And I'm wondering, in your kind of, professional opinion, as you read the literature of in the liturgy and what's happening out there, do you see that that we're overlooking that, or a way in which we might engage it?
It's a tough question, because I will say, for one, I see a small slice. So just to be clear of that. And also, I've not seen a ton of it actually in person of late, but I think that there's a scripture about this, the body of Christ and the different skills that each of us bring in different ways. There are churches that are going to be better for chemists than botanists. There are churches that are going to be better for mathematicians than astronomers. And you can make the argument that sometimes if you can get a really good chemistry church going over here, that might help the astrophysicist church across the street figure some things out. We have lessons to learn from each other. So I don't know how to feel about that. I know a lot of ministry of late seems to be kind of more focused than it has been in the past. So you've got a particular set of skills. I know it's a different movie, but and how do we use those? So I think your question is getting at, how do we build kind of an omnibus church that has all these talents that can be brought to bear? And part of that is acknowledging those gifts, and part of it is creating a structure that will let them do their thing without those of us who don't quite know what we're doing getting in the way.
So I love this, because it's also from crisis. Crisis provokes opportunity. It's amazing at how many churches were never going to stream online on March 8th. And then by March 15th, they sure figured out that somebody with a shaky iPhone could do something.
Yep.
It's a when he overtakes when Watney, and forgive me, I said Watley earlier because I've been talking to my friend Erica Wadley and it's just marred my brain. Watney overtakes the Pathfinder and Sojourner. He finds the Mars probes, and I just love. He's so irreverent, but he takes them and puts together this communications array. They continually find ways to say, well, what if we do this, or what if we try that?
Yeah. And
there's this honesty about what he is and is not willing to do. In the book, I remember where they're like, please stop swearing, Mark. The whole world is reading this, and he sends an ASCII or SCSI picture of boobs, because he calls them boobs. I would use the anatomic.
I think that's a kind editing on that particular one. He also says, I wish you all would quit micromanaging me. I've got every botanist on the planet trying to tell me how to grow my crops.
So that's the question then. How do we equip leaders to lead?
Yeah. It's kind of dangerous, isn't it?
I'm so mad about this, but I'm not going to treat you like my therapist.
So I tend to come from the leadership model that goes with the Ron Heifetz and Jim Collins thinking of getting the right people on the bus. That's Collins. And oh shoot, now that I've quoted him, I can't remember the kind of basic theory on Heifetz. But basically, it's how do you see the big picture, and then how do you let the big picture continue to do its thing and understand it while not getting in its way. And there's a difference between leadership and authority, right? And so what we have to figure out how to do in any functional, healthy organization is balance the leadership that the actual leaders, the people that people are going to follow, and those who we say are leaders, we have to let them lead. And then we have to let the authorities do what they have to do, like pay the bills, follow the bylaws, make sure that we have insurance for the company, that kind of stuff, and keep those two separate as much as we need to. Because when authority encroaches on leadership, that's when trouble happens. Because authority is really good at overtaking leadership. If you want to get political, it's not been hard to see where authority has overtaken leadership in the last few years. Because if you want to look at what leadership is, leadership transforms for the common good. That's one of Heifetz's main principles here. Leadership transforms for the common good. I'm not sure we've seen a whole lot of that of late. Probably since before the turn of the century. And not all of that's because the actual leaders are attempting to try it. It's because circumstances have kept it from happening. Authority has overridden leadership. So if you want to take that back down to a congregational level, you got to have your administrative board, your church cabinet, whatever, get the hell out of the way and let the pastor do what needs to be done. If the pastor is able to utilize the gifts of the people working on the team as effectively as possible. Because if the pastor can't do that, then you're screwed.
See, and I appreciate this because it's a different model of leadership than I think I generally understand and approach in some regards. In some regards, it's very similar. But I would also, I think, push back a little bit on the authority and leadership space because not all leaders have been given the authority to lead.
Exactly.
So, it's been wrong for hundreds of years. I don't know. When did women actually start being able to lead? I don't know that we're even there yet. In writ large, right? And so I think that these models are helpful as we think about what comes next and how we might grow and move into those models of leadership and authority. Because I don't necessarily think I see them as separate in that way. I see, or that one overtakes the other for good or bad, but that healthy, deliberate and intentional relationship between the two for the good of all is helpful. And where I see that in this movie really well, and it was one of the points that I was really touched. And one of my questions, and well, I'll ask it now, but where do you see God in this movie is a space in which I was really curious. Mm-hmm. And for me, I think, and this has to do with both leadership, authority, vision, and God, is at the very end when Mark is riding, he takes his, whatever the rover is towards the ship that's going to take him up. And he writes that note that says, for whoever comes next, take care of her. She's this buggy, she saved my life, or this, she saved my life, which is a vision of that not only is he going to make it or that people know his story, but that there's going to be a story that comes next. Yeah. And I think that that's a really beautiful way in which to engage faith. And when we talk about vision for the church, how we might get out of our own stories enough to let the next story evolve. Yeah.
So Watney confesses, at least in the book, and I don't think they included it in the movie, that he's really not a person of faith. He doesn't have any particular belief or need to believe in God. But he is a person of faith. He has faith in other humans to do the right thing. He has faith in himself to do everything he needs to do to survive. He'll do everything he can. And if it doesn't work out, you know what? At least he came really, really close. At least he saw Hermes as it was on its way back. So he has that faith. Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that a terrifying thought to think of, just of being within a couple hundred yards of your salvation and miss it? Um, and you thought it was bad missing the exit on the turnpike. So, he has that faith in others built in, which I think is a God-given gift. I don't think humanity could have survived this long if we didn't trust others. He also has a respect for the world he inhabits. He sits up on that mountaintop and looks out over the valley, and he recognizes, he says I think he's leaving a message for Commander Lewis in case he doesn't make it. I think it's the day or two after the resupply rocket blows up.
Oh, yeah.
And he says, I get the privilege of getting to see this every day. And every time I go somewhere, I'm the first person to ever see that. And he recognizes the awe of what God has created. And he does that in a particularly spiritual way, not a religious way. He's not doing the kind of churchy stuff, but I think he feels that in his bones and understands there's something bigger at play here. Now, Andy Weir did not build him that way necessarily, but I think it's easy to read that into the script.
So we talk about the resupply ship, and I agree. And there is this level of in recovery communities, there's the aspect of God is whatever you need God to be. Good orderly direction, or Jesus Christ incarnate, or anything else. So there is this understanding that God is a communicated idea, not necessarily a fixed entity, in both speculative fiction and recovery, I suppose. So with the resupply ship, you said something, and it really is within the book, for those of you who or book and movie, China is tapped because they're getting ready to send a mission to Mars, and they have the ability to resupply the Hermes. Is that correct?
Right. Hermes is the kind of the shuttle that goes back and forth from Mars that takes the different Martian landing crews back and forth.
Precisely. So the resupply ship is going to go to Hermes. Hermes is going to turn around essentially and go back and get Watley. And there's issues. Why do I keep saying Watley? Watney. Thank you. Excuse me. I really have read the book numerous times.
Well, I think you listened to some Jody Watney earlier today. Watley there. See, now I'm doing it. Anyhow, go ahead.
Anyways, there's this whole thing with China where they're like, why are we doing this? Why are we helping the Americans? Like, there's this inside the Chinese space agency. And it finally comes down to, this is the right thing to do. And Watney says at the end, when there's a disaster, people help. No matter what it is, no matter what it looks like, there's going to be some assholes who don't do the right thing, but the rest of us outnumber them. That's another thing I want to paint on the wall of every congregation. Because we talk about vision and we talk about the future orientation. The mission is get Watney home. The crew of the Hermes has figured out who's going to eat the rest of them if things go horribly south. Like the mission is get him home. And I think so often the institutional church's mission is preserve the building, maintain tradition, build membership on our terms, have fellowship meals every month, keep the children's classrooms exactly where there's so many things to deal with.
But there's another element to that we haven't mentioned, and it is that it's mutiny. The crew of Hermes are on their way home, and they are sent a coded message that says, if you turn around now, you can go back and bring Mark home. It's going to cost you another year in space, but you can save him. And NASA has been squelching this information because they don't want to distract the astronauts. And the crew decides on their own, we're going back. They commit mutiny, straight up, good old fashioned space mutiny. Love it. And so,
steely-eyed missile man.
Yeah, that's right. The steely-eyed missile man, indeed. And so, if you're going to save your congregation, sometimes you need to have a little mutiny, right? You've got to start throwing out these ideas that people aren't going to like. My home congregation still has the sanctuary across the street that is more than a century old. And we rent it out to another congregation, and I'm fine with that. It's a good financial generation, moneymaker, call it what it is. But I have floated the idea of, let's sell that. We don't need it. And we still own it. So, I mean, I haven't yet tried to take control of Hermes and turn it around, but I'm curious, what is it going to take to actually spin that building off into something else. And there are good arguments on both sides. So if you're listening from home, don't take me the wrong way. But yeah, sometimes it takes a little mutiny to get things done. It takes a little subversion to make things happen. And that's what brings Mark home, is the decision of his 5 crewmates to turn the ship around and go back and get our boy.
And I love that. And I love, for me, at the very end, and where I think I also really saw God in this space, because hosting a podcast about the theology of pop culture every week makes you like directly ask those questions in everything you're watching, regardless of what it is.
I'm sure it bleeds over into the rest of your life. Yeah,
it does.
Christ in an infomercial, Brad.
It's a little weird where God will, like, all of a sudden you watch something that's just very, like, you're like, what? And you're like, oh, why is this speaking to the church in this time? But it does. But I'm also in New York, and at the end there's this big like thing where they're all in Times Square watching the big billboards as he comes home, and there's this unifying aspect, and it's very reminiscent of, like, yeah, and there's that unifying. It feels a little like Times Square in New York, or at New Year's, with like the ball drop, but this time it's like this centralized understanding globally, that because the Chinese are now involved, and it's not a small thing to bring someone home, and they're all in it together. And in this season of the world, I very much miss conversations and spaces where it's like, oh, there's a common goal. Oh, we're all like, we're willing to do hard things for, this one person, right? Because right now, very few people are willing to do not like very easy things for mass amounts of people, rather than everyone for one.
Like a transportation infrastructure bill or something like that?
Yeah, I don't know.
How about the junior senator from Texas is getting salty because Big Bird has said he got vaccinated?
The junior senator from Texas is just one big pile of salt. So you can take that biblically if you wish.
You mispronounced. Never mind.
You mispronounced potato manure.
We'll test there. I don't know about you, but.
No, but I missed, I don't know. And granted, I was trying to think, have we ever done that in our, like, what does it actually look like to, like, for the whole world to care about this one person, rather than, but I just, like, the church at its best, I don't know, community at its best, it does the hard, sends the message, it's a steely-eyed Muslim, like, that says, we're going back for our guy, because our discomfort, our being in space away from our family for another, like, almost year, I think it, or half, it's a while, to make sure this one person has a shot at survival. Not even that he's gonna survive.
The odds are still slim.
Yeah, that he's got a shot at it. Like, I miss taking those types of risks, or seeing people take those types of risks to really bring about just change.
It's looking for the one lost sheep.
Yeah.
You're giving me your final answer, Brad.
That's not my final answer.
Excellent.
I love it.
I have a different take on that. I'm just seeing I'm dancing all over the Bible today.
I'm here for it. I mean, I really am, but I don't know.
It's rare for me, to be clear.
As you were saying, though, that, where you were in 2015 or 2014, 2015, when this came out, and how it spoke to you, I too watched it. And as I was looking for church and God at work in it, it was also very reminiscent of, I didn't grow up in church. I didn't, and I too came to church writ large alone in a space that was lonely, and tried to, see what I could plant and grow within beloved community. And, it bore fruit that apparently is still growing, possibly. But this movie, I think, speaks to something bigger, of that we are all kind of also always alone, right? Like, we are in this space alone together. And that movie speaks, I think, really beautifully to that. And I'm wondering if Alone Together speaks to either of you as part of the narrative that we need to embrace in a deeper way for the church.
We are in a time when we think we are in community when we log on to our phones and post pictures and phrases and share with others. But that is much different than pulling up the picture on our phone and showing it to the person sitting next to us. And I've got 3 kids, ages 22, 19, and almost 12. And my first one has no use for social media. My second one is sliding her way on Instagram, and my third one is all in on TikTok. And I am curious what the isolation of 2020 and 21 did to that generation of kids who missed a full year of social interaction, who could not have proms or sporting events, who could not have a college life that got them out the door well, and or for whom online learning was an unmitigated disaster. And I think isolation and being sent home or not being able to interact with your peers is going to be something that's going to linger with our generation, with everyone who's alive right now and cognizant of what's happening. It's going to stick with us a long, long time. There are going to be studies written forever about this generation, but I've seen how it's going to impact that elementary to college age on our kids in ways I fear to imagine what's going to happen. We're going to see increases in depression. We're going to see increases in substance abuse. We'll probably end up seeing some increases in violence. I would just forecast on that. And it just goes to show isolation is a bad thing. And so we got to figure out a way to create community, even if it is through the little green dot next to our camera, and find a way to make that authentic. And I know we gave it a really great shot early in 2020, but we got tired of that by Memorial Day, didn't we? And we were already starting to wear out on Zoom, and it just continues. Now, Zoom's part of my daily life these days. I probably Zoom 2-3 hours a day because my staff, instead of all being in St. Louis, is now spread out over several states. It's a good thing. It's a bad thing. At least now my parents know how to work Zoom, and so we can have those conversations, and they no longer have to say, well, can you call Zoe for me and put her on so I can talk to my grandma? Like, no, do it yourself. But that isolation, that connection, we found different ways to connect, but I'm not sure it's going to have the same kind of substance that we need to have in person. It's a long answer for a good question.
I feel like it's helpful, because I think part of our job is also, as we come back in, whatever coming back looks like, right? You might still be someone that's going to be fully online because you took a second job and you're in service. Like, what I meant by alone together, though, is that we have moved into spaces of like I was actually isolated like over the last couple of years. So I've learned to be a new friend to myself. I've learned to be curious about the things I need in connection. And so as we are in community together, and all of a sudden we're just piled on top of each other for better or worse, there's still going to be the people that feel isolated, that feel alone. And if we don't name that as the church well, I fear that we do a disservice, because it's not just about coming back together. It's not just about being next to each other and showing, it's about the connections that happen. So if we have an entire generation of kids that have grown up and learned to connect authentically online, do we do ourselves a disservice by saying, and that's not real, or that's not as good, or that's not as communicative?
And time will tell. Thank you for that clarification. Time will tell how effective that is.
Sure.
It will be curious to watch how my college freshman and my 6th grader, who are so alike in almost every other way, differ on that very issue. And I won't know that one for probably a good 10 years.
Sure. And I think Mark, as the Martian, right? He's the one that
he's the greatest botanist on the planet.
He's the greatest botanist on the planet. I mean, I think that's a second episode of should we be colonizing other planets, but that's a whole, again, what does colonization?
I don't think he meant to. It just kind of happened. He was going to come home after a month.
Should we be going to Mars in the first place?
Can I just say one thing that terrifies me is if aliens ever land and if they walk out and they have the same tactics about Christianity as like white evangelicals do, I'm so scared of being colonized the way that Europeans have colonized.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You will be baptized in Bleep Norp, or you will be destroyed. This is a total side note. Sorry.
No, we're talking about someone going into space, right? Going into the heavens, that for those of us that believe in Christian scriptures, or, you know, like the God created the heavens and the earth, right? And like, so is it even ours to explore in that way? Again, different conversation. I did not mean to go down this. What I meant to do was, here's this man that it had this unique experience of unique individualized experience that kept him from so much and from so many. And I feel like we have all gone through that, and we've made these new spaces meaningful. We've made our home lives anew in different ways. And yet we long to be pulled back in. Yeah. And as we come into this new year, it is almost 2022. Like, who saw that coming? What does it mean for us as the church to both long and hold that experience has changed us? Because he is not the same Mark that he was going into it.
Right. So at the end of the movie, in that last scene after he returns, the book ends with him back on Hermes, and that's done. I'm going home. End of it. But the movie adds, I think, a great little 2-3 minute segment where he's sitting on a campus and on a bench, and it says Soul One, or Day One. So we know he's back home, and he's sitting there drinking his latte, and he looks down and he sees a little tiny plant, an inch tall, and he says something to the effect of, "Hey there, little guy." And as a botanist, he appreciates that, but odds are that Mark Watney, the botanist who left Earth, would never have given a second thought to that little weed, because it is truly the kind of thing that any of us, if we see it in our sidewalk, we pull out and we throw away. But he treasures that little thing. So he's left Earth. He's been gone for a couple of years. He comes back and he sees the little details. How are we, having been gone for a couple of years from church, going to come back and see those little details and cherish the little things that we saw there, but also work to change what we recognize needs to be done differently? I think that's to me is how the Martian takes us back home to our congregations and helps us see the life in the weeds.
Yeah.
I'm going to feel really bad the next time I pluck weeds out of my driveway now.
Yeah, we're radically changed by the things that matter and are meaningful. So
yeah.
Well, Brad, I am keeping an eye on our time and being cognizant of it and respectful of it. I do want to shepherd us towards our final question. It is the same question we ask everyone, be they interviewees or contributors to a book of essays on pop culture and theology that may be forthcoming from Chalice Press in the very near future. That question is asked by Spiff, because my way of doing it is Bible, Martian, but Spiff is so much better.
Can you be more specific, please?
The thing is that he can't, and so that's how he opens the show, because I never know how to open a show, and I close it in this way. So
you're a closer. Brad, those are the gifts that you have.
Look at it, and that's why we're a good team.
I'm gonna snatch the shit out of this podcast.
These are good potatoes to come. Brad, thank you for coming on the show.
Happy to do it.
It's always a pleasure to talk to you and to grow and learn in these new spaces, because again, as we look through movies that are more established or new or whatever they are, like, we get to look for things about connection, about how God is moving us towards each other, and or even towards the God within, because I would also make the point that maybe part of where the God lies is within Mark as he kind of becomes anew. So as we are wont to do, our final question is, what biblical theme, text, verse, person, narrative are you most reminded of in The Martian?
I've thrown a few of them out, but the one that keeps coming back to me is the themes of exile. When we are in a foreign land and we do not know the people around us or the environment around us, and we don't know how we're going to make it, and yet we find a way, and yet we persevere. How do we fall back on our faith, on the God-given brain and intelligence that we have, and the resilience that resides within us? How do we tap all of that to survive the exile that we may never escape from, or if we're lucky to get the heck out of here and get back home to where we want to be and where we are around those who love us and the ones that nurture us and will take care of us and make life worth living.
All right. And I should note that Samaritans is an anagram of as Martians.
Well, now.
I'm going to go with my favorite parable in all of Scripture, which is Luke chapter 13, verses 6-9, which is the parable of the fig tree, wherein the fig tree is not bearing fruit and the owner of the vineyard wants it torn out. And the gardener says, let me put manure around the roots. And if it doesn't work in a year, then you can tear it out. And I mean, I have a whole sermon about the word manure in Scripture. It happens 3 times. So
nice.
I'm into it. I like it. Also, don't you have a new fig tree? Aren't you new?
What's up?
I said, also, don't you have a new fig tree?
I do. A friend of mine mailed me a fig tree this week.
I know.
So
I love that.
I'm going to go so eschatological.
I'm so here for it. I'm going to go with that the Hermes mission are the women at the tomb and who turn around and don't listen to Jesus as he says and tell no one. Here's the thing. And they're like, clearly they told someone because we have stories.
So women preachers are mutinous. I like that.
I mean,
they're subversive. That's good.
I've been called worse. So
I like that. I like both of those. Yeah.
I think that there's a turn in which they're, they clearly were like, yeah, Jesus, we got it. And we'll tell no one. And then like clearly went and just told all the people.
Yeah.
Because it's what was needed to be done for the slim chance that he was right, that we could, that this type of salvation, for lack of a better term, could come. And so there's my answer.
Yeah, what does it mean to give up, to risk your life for the sake of hopefully saving another? But that's another topic for another show. I do remind our listeners and our viewers, and Brad, if you're interested, Jeff Wonroe Designs, based out of St. Louis, Missouri, just like Chalice Press, is the sponsor of the show. That is, Jeff Wonroe Designs is the sponsor of the show, but Brad, call us. Jeff Wonroe Designs, you can look at the full catalog of stoles, paraments, banners, really everything for your altar or personal needs. Jeff Wonroe, JEFFWUNROW.com. Brad, thank you very much for finding time in your schedule to come and talk to us about The Martian.
You invited me to come talk about the greatest movie of all time during the workday. And you know what? I would be willing to talk much, much more.
Well, I'll tell you what,
because I'm having a lot of fun. Thank you.
Like 7 different series of Star Trek. So we have plenty to talk about. Fear not. And until next time, though, I'm the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
I'm the Reverend Stephanie Kendall.
And thank you, Brad.
Brad Lyons.
Thank you.
We're going to work on our closing, and we'll see you next time.